All right. You know what? Maybe we'll go ahead and get started, and then we can keep on folding people in as they arrive. At any point, you're also able to leave the room and come back should you need to. And just so you know, if you do get disconnected and want to come back into our room, if you didn't notice, we are in room number 2. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. And I'll be with you for the first 20 minutes or so of this conversation, and then I will leave the room, and Susan will join you next, and then Mallory will join after that. So because our goal here is really a collaborative exploration of the process of the local collaboration of enabling better places, a zoning guide for Vermont neighborhoods, I'm very interested in hearing your challenges and opportunities that you anticipate facing in implementing incremental zoning reform in your neighborhood. And then kind of as the swarm mentality that we're more intelligent together with all of us than any of us are on our own, you know, kind of helping to co-create some solutions that are appropriate in Vermont. So with that, before we really dive in, could we just like go around the room and everyone say your name and who you work for and where you're from? So I'll start. As you know, Hazel Boris with Placemakers. I'm originally from Alabama, and now I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, although I work mostly in the US. So Gretchen, do you want to, I'm going to just call out your name so it will be obvious who's next.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Haverluck, and I'm from the town of Wilmington. And actually, you know, Mike Tuller is also in this group, and we strategically chose different topics so we wouldn't be in the same room because we're going to talk about the same exact thing. Is it possible that I leave, Hazel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or are we kind of stuck?
You are not at all stuck. If you want to be in a different room, just click leave room.
I just think that it will be advantageous for the town of Wilmington if we are hearing different things.
Beautiful. So yeah,
Okay.
when you go back out to Avery, just tell her either room 1 or room 3. This is kind of the intermediate room based on what people have said that where they are and the process of thinking through zoning reform. And just so you know, I'll quickly let you know that room number 3 is the advanced breakout room if you want to go there, or room number 1 is the beginner's room for people who are just really getting started thinking about this whole idea.
Okay, Mike, because you have the expertise in planning, do you think you should go to 3 and I should stay here?
I'll gladly do that. That's fine.
Sorry to take up the time on this.
If it's okay with Hazel, it's okay with me.
That's great. I'm sorry. We don't mean to vote you off the island. Ken is on.
Stay on the island.
I'm going to leave also. What was the more advanced group? Was it 3?
Yes, 3
okay.
is the more advanced group.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Although all of us are rotating through all, so the whole idea is that by the time we're finished with today, we're all somewhere at the same level. Okay, thank you for that, Gretchen. Emily, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name's Emily. I'm a planner with the town of Williston. I'm coming to this training both as a career planner working for Williston and as a resident of Waterbury, Vermont, where we're dealing with similar challenges to change zoning and make communities more livable.
Great. Ken, do you want to go next?
Yes, Ken Esty, Newfane, Vermont. This is what Newfane, Vermont looks like in the winter. And so planning commissioner, chair of the planning commission, it's all volunteer. Not one of us is a planner, but we are a planner. We are planners now because we are on the commission, but we are, you know, really basically new to the work, committed to the work, and eager to talk about affordable housing, for instance.
Awesome. Emily Cloft, sorry, I just noticed there's 2 Emilys.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Emily. I'm a planner for Northwest Regional Planning Commission, which serves Franklin and Grand Isle counties. And I actually live down in Chittenden County in Burlington.
Larry, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Larry Lewack, the town planner for Charlotte. I've been in this position 6 months, so still relatively new, but I worked in Bolton, Vermont for 2 years before that as the planner and the zoning administrator, and have some other planning experience as a member of planning commissions in Burlington and Winooski for about 10 years. So I've seen issues both from the urban and the very rural perspectives.
Thank you. Janet, you're up next.
Hi, Janet Shatney, Director of Planning, Zoning, and as of last July, Assessing. So I wear several hats here in the city. I've been the planning director now for 5.5 years. I started with the city as a zoning administrator, and I have a 15.5-year background in solid waste. My challenges or things that I would like to hear today are more about affordable housing. We have a very compact 4 square mile municipality. Always having challenges there, trying to meet the demands.
Thank you. Could you tell me your city name or town name again?
Certainly, City of Barrie.
Okay, nice. Jake, I think you're up next.
Yeah, thanks, Hazel. And I missed the front question, but it's just
just like who you are, where you work, and kind of these 6 topics, which one do you think we should start with?
great. So I am Jake Hemrick, Planning Policy Manager at the Department of Housing and Community Development, a sponsor of today's event, and I've been part of the team that developed the Enabling Better Places Zoning for Great Neighborhoods. Live in Barrie City, so great to see my local planning director, Janet, here in the room, as well as many other familiar faces. I'd also put affordable housing on that list.
Sounds great. Paul Simon?
Hi, my name is Paul Simon. I'm a landscape architect with parkarchitecture.com. I'm also a developer with the housinginitiative.com, and we're focused on moderate income housing needs. So I'm very interested in the affordable housing piece and talking about sustainability and the 3 aspects of sustainability, 2 of which I think Vermont do well with, in terms of environmental best practices and community engagement, which is kind of what we're doing today. But the equity, the 3rd piece, which is the equity piece, which I think is not handled well enough in Vermont and across the country right now. People are struggling to afford and meet the housing needs. So that's what I'm interested in.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Annette Bourne, welcome.
Hi, I hope you don't mind an interloper from Rhode Island, but I did move here from Vermont, where I worked at what was the Rockingham Area Community Land Trust in Springfield, now merged with what was Brattleboro Area Community Land Trust and is now, I believe, Wyndham-Windsor Regional Land Trust. Anyway, I'd love to talk about housing affordability, both what we call big A housing affordability, meaning subsidized, land trusted, long-term, and little a, which is really market rate affordability. So yes, and right after this session, I'll be jumping on a conference to talk about that very topic. So I'll be bringing your thoughts forward with me.
Thank you. And I will be also your scribe. That's my job today is predominantly to be the scribe. So pardon me as I jump back off and type as you all talk. Welcome, Abby Blything.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Abby Blything. I work at the University of Vermont as a sustainable transportation coordinator, but really coming this today as my role on the Winooski Planning Commission and the CCRPC board. And I am a certified planner as well. I think what I'm really interested about discussing today is that, I guess what we were calling the little A affordability, that middle, background, we have in Winooski quite a lot of very affordable, like subsidized, very affordable housing. But we don't have that moderate, we don't have an abundance of that moderate level of housing. And then Winooski is really unique in the sense it's 1.5 square miles. I believe we're the most densely developed community in northern New England, so not even just Vermont. So we already have high levels of density, and what we're struggling to do is maintain housing for families. So family size housing. Most of our homes are small to begin with, and then they're being chopped up into even smaller units. So I think we're probably unique with those areas of challenges.
Thank you. Welcome, Claire Tebbs.
Hi, everyone. Great to see some familiar faces and some new faces, and Rhode Islanders are welcome. I am Vermont planner, work in lots of different realms, but I'm usually deep in talking about complete streets and connections, but where I feel most lacking is the affordable housing mechanisms to really making that work and happen. So that's what I want to get to today, mostly.
Sounds good. Zach, welcome. Oh, thanks.
Hi, I'm Zach Maya. I'm an assistant planner at the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. I apologize if my Wi-Fi is slow. At Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, we do a lot of work to help our municipalities with their bylaw updates, as well as helping them implement their municipal plans. So for me, definitely interested in affordable housing, because that's really a line that we are seeing be drawn between the plan and implementation. So definitely something that I'm interested in speaking with all of you more about.
Sounds great. M. Gwaine, welcome. Yes, you. I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly name there. Thank you.
Unmute.
There we go.
Hi, it's Michael Gone, as in gone but not forgotten. My claim of fame is that I am the brother-in-law of Larry Lewack, another one of the people here and another one of the participants. I'm an attorney in St. Albans, Vermont. I represent a number of municipalities. I also sit on the Planning Commission of the City of St. Albans, and the City Planning Commission is struggling with adaptive reuse of the older homes. According to studies that we've read, is that, well, the house in which I live was built in 1860 something, well before the age of automobiles, and much of the city was likewise developed before that time. There is not a lot of, the streets are narrow, not a lot of room for off-street parking, on-street parking. And house sizes are large. At the point in time that my house was built, I think the average household size was around 7 people. It's now down to about 2 people. And we're struggling with what to do with our old housing stock to make it fit for the community as it exists today.
Thank you. Matt Osborne, welcome.
Hi, my name is Matt Osborne. I'm a planner for the town of Hartford in the Upper Valley area. I've worked there for over 20 years. We have a lot of good things going on in Hartford. We've had some economic revitalization in the last 10 plus years. We have a real need for more housing. So that's something I'm hoping to get more ideas on how we can have more housing in Hartford.
Thank you. Diane, welcome.
Hi there. I'm Diane Clemens. I'm a planning commissioner in Essex Junction. Our we're currently going to be looking at our land development code. So this is the prime time to try to get any zoning changes or anything else in the works. We're currently having numerous 4-story buildings that are going up. COVID, of course, has delayed quite a few things. And so everything seems to be all mushrooming at the same time, which of course is concerning the locals, okay, especially the ones who are having their streets ripped up because the construction vehicles are out front. So it's kind of interesting having no development for 40 years and then suddenly something's mushrooming. So, you know, it's good for business. A lot of the business people are thrilled to death. The occupancy for the first building that was completed is residential, and it's got, I hate to say it, studios and efficiencies with 1-bedroom apartments, which is now becoming a concern because everybody wants to go in that same direction. So as I'm a justice of the peace, so I just married a couple that said, yeah, our kids do in like 2 months. Where can we go? And the unfortunate part is that those 2- and 3-bedroom apartments that used to be there are no longer. So that middle category is definitely, you know, we need to facilitate the young families that are coming in. And, but that doesn't seem to be where our developers are going. So I'm interested, yes, and very much in affordable housing and how to facilitate our younger families.
Wonderful. Speaking of facilitation, the next facilitator comes in approximately 4 minutes. So I still would love to get through introductions, and just realizing that they will have all of our notes that you've just shared with each other. And as you start to dive in, clearly you're going to probably be starting at affordable housing. Ellis, welcome.
Yes, hello, my name is Wayne Ellis. Sorry, it doesn't show. I am a new potential member of the Jericho Affordable Housing Committee. So I've been working with Bob Robbins and the team. Most of my work has been on the Cemetery Association and helping with some trails and things like that. So I'm new to this. I have a lot of life experience in this. I've lived in California and know what it's like for finding affordable housing for professionals, which, believe it or not, is an issue there. And I'm interested, I grew up on a farm, so I'm interested, like the former speaker was saying, that concern for the group of housing that young families would be able to access.
Sounds good. Thank you. Andrew, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Andrew Graminsky, planner with the town of Brattleboro. Brattleboro was actually one of the case study communities for the Zoning for Great Neighborhoods project. And we recently, in September, adopted an interim bylaw that to address the issue of the lack of affordable housing. And part of that was out of the recommendations made by the CNU, as well as COVID-related issues with the availability of funding to create new affordable housing units, but landlords couldn't make them because of our current bylaws. So we went in and to address that. So I thought I could potentially share what we did in terms of passing that ordinance, and it helped create over 20 affordable units in the last few months.
That's awesome.
So some success, but there's still a need to address that affordability issue, especially since over half of the folks living in Brattleboro are renters.
Thanks, Andrew. So as we go through the next 7 introductions, would you mind texting in the chat a link to your draft bylaw if you have it handy? Katie Gallagher, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm a planner with the Mad River Valley Planning District. Housing, like everyone else, is a huge concern for us. We have 2 ski resorts, Sugar Bush being the largest, and so there's a big challenge with visitors and second homeowners and short-term rentals is a big thing that we've been talking about recently. And the other challenge that we have is that we essentially work together as 3 different towns, but one of those towns has the kind of main commercial center and would also be the place that we're looking at for trying to consolidate housing in a smart growth way. And so it's interesting trying to support that single town in development and not have them feel like it's a burden. And so those are the main things that we are trying to work on. But housing for sure, and all of its different challenges is a constant.
Totally get it. So the other people don't have your videos on. If any of you choose, you're welcome to introduce yourself and talk about your favorite topic, or if you prefer not to for whatever reason, that's great as well.
Hello, my name is Constance Victory. And are you able to hear me? Just making sure.
Yes, thank you.
You are? Okay, wonderful. So yes, I'm actually based in New York. And I did my master's course in historic and sustainable architecture with a focus on adaptive reuse. So my whole purpose in doing that was really to create affordable housing, vitality within neighborhoods, lively, safe, clean streets, all using historic buildings and, with sustainable measures so that we don't have to tear things down and, knock things out to make these things happen. We can utilize what we already have with sustainable measures and to make a safer, cleaner, healthier ecosystem.
Thank you. Anyone else who is on mute? Oh, welcome.
Hi, this is Irene Nagel. I'm not sure if you, I actually probably should change my title there. I am from the Northeastern Vermont Development Association. I'm a planner there. And that was actually very interesting to hear what Constance just said, because I also have a background in historic preservation. And I have a personal interest in seeing infill development rather than the rural areas continue to get filled with single family residences. I'm actually working with a town just getting started. They received a municipal planning grant. It's Troy up on the Canadian border, and they want to look at how they can sort of redo their zoning in order to encourage more development in their village centers. So that should be an interesting project, and I'm hoping that this course will help me be better prepared as I work with them.
Thank you. Alexander, were you going to join next?
Hey, how's it going? My name is Alec Jansimus. I'm a former Vermonter and resident of the Brattleboro, Marlboro area. I was born up there, but haven't lived there in a little while. Because of COVID, I am pivoting my career entirely, and I'm going back to school to study urban planning, hopefully with a focus on transportation and climate migration, and kind of Vermont is like my default kind of frame of reference for, I don't know, America in a lot of ways, but was super curious to see what conversations were happening and work was being done in rural places and northern places. And this popped up, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if any of the other people on mute want to say hello before we dive a little further in.
Hi, everyone. I hope that you can hear me.
Yes.
My name is Simone Haiju. I'm the Director of Planning for the town of Milton in Chittenden County. I'm interested in talking about affordable housing like everyone else. I'm really curious to hear some success stories around changing the perception around affordable housing. And specifically, I want to learn about ADUs and cottage PUDs, how we can encourage those. And any aging in place strategies that have been successful around the state. Thank you.
Great. All right, Alyssa and Marcy.
If I could just pop up and say hello quickly. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate McCarthy. I'm with the Vermont Natural Resources Council, where I work as a planner. We're a statewide environmental organization. So I do on-the-ground planning now and again, but not as much as I'd like. So I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. I'm mostly here to listen. I also work on state policy, and it's very important that that be well informed. So I'm particularly interested to listen to you. And then recreationally, for fun, I am a planner working on our local development review board, which I chair here in Montpelier. And I'm also on the Vermont Housing Conservation Board of Directors. So affordable housing and conservation are right up there with my interests. So I'm mostly here to listen. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Alyssa or Marcy, would either of you like to jump in or not really? Okay, so.
Well, I
go
can
ahead.
jump in. I couldn't find my mute.
No worries.
I'm on the Planning Commission for the town of Bradford, and we're dealing with development that occurs in what we call our Lower Plain, which is a commercial district. And we've just introduced in our zoning design standards, but I'm not sure that they are working really effectively because of the way that developers have responded to them. And our objective is to try to make that area look and feel like our little downtown village as much as possible.
Sounds good. So I guess, I mean, all of you who have basically focused in on one topic, which I think it's so great that you're all in the same room, because I'm just quickly looking at the notes from the other two rooms and they are not as focused as you all are. So it's great that we get to spend an hour on this very generative discussion. Andrew, thanks for sharing the link to Brattleboro and your work there. And do you want to talk a little bit about that, and especially in respect to, was this interim zoning bylaw that you just adopted on September 1, 2020, were you looking at all at the Vermont Guide work in progress at all? And if so, in what ways did it help you at all?
Yes, absolutely. We did use that as a guide towards implementing that bylaw when it comes to actual like code language and where in our code we should make that reform. And we kind of acted quickly, knowing that there was this funding from the CARES Act to create new units. We had a bunch of requests from landlords if coming to our planning commission if we could make changes by a certain date so they could achieve those. Obtain those funds to create those units by the end of the year. So we acted pretty fast in terms of drafting it, basically looking at density caps. That was the first thing we said, oh, we need to eliminate in all our zones basically served by water and sewer in close access to services. So like near our downtown, for example. And then also making sure that in our all our residential zones, multifamily housing was outright permitted, so we could avoid that permitting process, for example, going to the DRB, or not making things any more complicated as they needed to be. So basically the new bylaw is for existing housing. So a lot of landlords, they have these duplexes, or triplexes, and they want to make them to fourplexes and onward. And in some of these areas, lot size was limiting, and acreage was limiting the creation of new units. So that was the basis behind that. So most of the new units that we have seen created are in existing multifamily homes, and with the addition of even some single family becoming duplexes. But yes, we did use the zoning for great neighborhoods as one of those as a resource.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm gonna leave you here for a moment, and Susan is getting ready to join you. Thank you again for all of your work and for being here today, and enjoy the conversation as it goes forward. See you in a bit.
And so we had a lot of public buy-in, which I think really helped. And then also the landlords supporting the creation of affordable housing also really helped, especially for the select board. It was an anonymous decision. There was no hiccups, I would say, along. It went very smoothly.
Sorry I was late. I went to the wrong room. But it sounds like you guys don't need me. You're having a good conversation. That's good. So what's the topic?
Susan, we were just talking a little bit about mostly about affordable housing. Everybody seems to be interested in about naturally affordable opportunities, kind of the political landscape of affordable housing. Brattleboro was talking about how they adopted, Andrew from Brattleboro, an interim zoning measure that allowed for the production of a lot of units in a short amount of time for landlords that were taking advantage of the CARES Act. Or other housers taking advantage of the CARES Act funding.
Mm-hmm. So are you guys, I'm just curious, are you having more success with like subsidized housing or with naturally occurring affordable housing? And through actual zoning bylaws itself, has anybody had any success in naturally occurring affordable housing? You know, just smaller units, more units, kind of the supply and demand. Yeah, Paul?
Well, this is Diane in Essex Junction. We have a lot of developers telling us that efficiencies, studios, and one-bedroom apartments are all that they're willing to construct because that's what the market wants right now. And I'm finding that after the fourth or fifth application, that in fact, one, when they had their master plan, it actually had 1s and 2-bedroom apartments, and now they're all 1s. It's, I can't even use the incentives we've got naturally in our planning code to encourage them to go to 2 bedrooms. I fear that small families are going to be excluded. Although being on the school board, I also know that there's a lot of kids that are in 1-bedroom apartments. So, you know, it's how do you get the larger apartments not excluded from the developers? It's I fear that we're going to become a community of just 1-bedroom apartments.
Well, there must be a demand for it, or they wouldn't be doing it. I mean, usually there's
the demand is huge. It's huge. Okay, especially in Chittenden County, it's huge. You know, and I know that my compatriots up here are doing their best to facilitate that. Everybody seems to want to come up here to Chittenden County for whatever reason. And something about those universities, and a lot of major employers. So it's knowing that housing can be there for 40 to 50 years. We haven't seen a lot come down. We've seen 3 buildings come down to put 1 up, one very large building to come up. So they're not taking the carrot, okay? Because there's the other part that is restrictive is that we used to have the possibility of going to 6 stories. And we're now restricted to 4 by our trustees, our select board. So because the community said, we don't want to look like Burlington. We're not Burlington, never will be Burlington. But we're darn close to Burlington and Winooski. And my kudos to Winooski, by the way. it's, you know, what carrot do I provide to get them to not exclude the small families?
This isn't a carrot, but I'm wondering the 1 bedrooms and efficiencies. Do you know what the range of rents are? I mean, because what we've discovered here in like the greater Providence area is that we're down to what are called micro units. And it really doesn't matter the square footage in terms of natural affordability. The square footage, the price per square footage is just exploding. So people are paying $800, $900 to live in a 200 square foot unit in a historic loft building. You know, and my daughter who lives in the Boston area, they're down to renting bedrooms. Apartments.com, you know, when I was in school there, you needed 3 or 4 roommates to go in on the rent. Now realtors are renting it by the bedroom. So is there any natural affordability, even though it's an efficiency or a studio?
My finding is that they're not willing to really disclose what they think they want to offer, but the word in the street is what you've talked about is normal. I hate to say it, that your nicer 1 bedrooms are going. One place that I thought was just average was at 1,700. It's almost, hey, the scary part is that you can, in the old housing that was put up during World War II, when the soldiers came home, you can rent a house for 18 to 20 to 2,000 in the older neighborhoods. But these new apartments are just, they're out there. And I can see why there's a scream for affordable housing.
We're experiencing the same thing in Winooski. We have undergone form-based code. So in our gateway districts, which are like Route 15, Route 2, the Mallets Bay Ave, the main corridors that enter our city, are form-based code. And it does, we found the same thing, the incentive for the developer to develop micro units is very present. And it must be because they can get more people into a smaller space for high rents. So since we are form-based code, it's a pretty easy process for these projects to get approved if they're structurally, you know, if they're meeting the structural requirements. But we feel like that's probably the last area that we need in terms of housing size. Like we have a lot of small unit housing. We have a lot of small homes broken up into smaller units. We have a lot of ADUs and detached cottages. We really need family housing. And so we had 3 huge developments go up, and they're all studio and 1 bedrooms, with the exception of one has 10% 2 bedrooms. So it just feels like the market isn't, the incentive for the developer is really to build small and to have, you know, where they can charge higher rents, they do. We have some like affordability requirements that they meet at minimums, but the incentives that we have don't encourage them to make more units affordable or to make units larger.
That's a really good point, because I was thinking about the form-based codes, and we're kind of creating the conditions for gentrification to occur, even though we're trying to create affordable housing. And that's a worry in Brattleboro, because we don't really have the tax basis means to create incentives like density bonuses, you know, to try to spur more affordable housing. So we're getting these developers coming in, especially in our downtown area, creating all these small units at market rate, you know, and we're talking, you know, more than 900 a month, upwards of 1,000. And we're getting a lot of the residents in downtown being displaced. And so for me, you know, looking at code reform, yeah, it's awesome. But at the same time, I feel like it is inherently creating the conditions and just pushing capitalism, you know, along. And to me, it's a major concern moving forward is, you know, obviously we want good code, but we also want affordable housing. And I'm worried.
I'm a landlord that has a building with 4 units of one bedroom, and I have another building with 4 units of 2 bedrooms. And I can tell you that I make more money on the 1-bedroom units and it's much less headaches. The 2-bedroom units have more people, more problems. So, and I can't get the same profitability of them. There's much more wear and tear on the 2 bedrooms. So I think there's a more, it's not just the developers, it's the actual landlords who probably, I think they do prefer the 1 bedrooms because there's less headaches and more profit. And so I think you have to take that into account. It's not capitalism per se. It's just, it's more difficult to rent to a family than it is to rent to a single person.
I think it's interesting, some of the trends that I'm hearing described, I think in some of the more urban places in the state. I think it's very different with some of the communities we have worked with in rural places. It's almost the opposite, in which because of, I think, and a lot of times it's infrastructure related, like lack of water and wastewater, there really isn't any sort of small units, and especially within like village center areas. And unlike a lot of areas in Franklin and Grand Isle County, especially Franklin County, there's more aging population rather than more new families. And so it can be a challenge for that aging population to find housing that meets their needs, that actually is smaller and is denser. So it's interesting to see that, like, there's kind of that reverse trend depending on the context that you're in.
I think Paul had something to say a while back and we moved in a different direction.
Sure. Well, back to your question, Susan, is anyone focused on trying to provide, I guess, that, you know, the missing middle or moderate housing or workforce housing? I think, and we're working on it on a project in Chittenden County, and it is difficult, and we're working on getting a development partner to team up with us on it. And we are including a lot of what people are thinking about, like tiny townhouses, you know, some 2-family units, three bedroom units, and whatnot. But the struggle that I think that has occurred over the years in Vermont is that we have had such a strong focus on, and for good reasons, on affordable housing, but there's a lot of nonprofit 501c3s that need that subsidy support, you know, that comes down from the federal government through the state to them. And for them to pencil out, they have to make sure that they get that support. And then on the other hand, you have the high-end developers that really need to build either single-family homes or high-end market stuff in order for their projects to pencil out. And then we have the municipalities in the middle that impose all the fees involved, right? So you got your sewer allocation fees, you got your parks and rec fees, you've got your school impact fees, you've got, you know, your wetlands impact, your wetlands buffer impacts, you've got a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do. So I think that what happens is missing middle housing is missing for a reason, and in Vermont, and we need to focus on that because most of us are in that moderate income, and most of us are putting stickies on our bills every month because we're living paycheck to paycheck. And COVID really woke us up to that. You know, people lasted a month with the savings that they had, and then, you know, people are struggling. So I think that it's a bigger conversation. I don't know what the fixes are, but we're still focused on our dream to provide that moderate income housing focus in our project. And, you know, we just hope it's gonna pencil out and it's gonna work, and we're gonna find that development partner to team up with us on it. But we have a good project and we're excited about it, and we think it's important to continue to pursue it. So.
Well, that's encouraging. I mean, it's encouraging and discouraging at the same time.
And Paul, to go off about the missing middle, I think a lot of communities in Vermont have the infrastructure and the type of housing that's consistent with missing middle. in terms of size and massing. And that's the reason why Brattleboro adopted this interim bylaw, because a lot of this housing with the units is within existing, some of these, old colonial homes, for example, and Victorian homes. And it's easy to create new units without necessarily changing the neighborhood character. Though I'm not always a fan of that term, but it works. And obviously when you pair, these with funding and then also recognizing a need to change your code, I think it's great that, you can have success stories like this. And I'm hoping that, depending on what happens with this administration, that we could get more funding to go towards landlords creating affordable housing for those folks who are close to homeless or are homeless.
When I've spoken to developers here in Rhode Island, I live in what is, the typical post-World War II neighborhood, similar to some of the neighborhoods in Brattleboro. For here, average size lots, 5,000 square feet. And when I've talked to the developers, I know about whether they could replicate this without subsidies. They absolutely say no. These are not huge homes, 1,400 square foot homes. And they also tell me, which I know is a lie, that there would be no market for them. So I think we forget that in the 1950s, when a lot of this stock was built, that the federal government was in effect subsidizing this kind of development, but not really putting any restrictions on it. So they were trying to build a middle class. They were trying to take people who had been apartment dwellers and make them single family home dwellers. And, the roads were subsidized, the development was subsidized, but there was no requirement, right? It was just, hey, we've got a middle class now. And we're trying to replicate that now. And I just don't think the conditions exist,
I think with the single bedroom studio apartments, looking at longer trends of what Annette talked about, the 50s, the single family home for the family with 2.5 kids, eventually we'll get to the point where that demand for studios and one bedrooms go down. And I'm sure we'll see those buildings then be converted to joining apartments, making them larger again, making them 2 or 3 bedrooms. So I think as long as those buildings, especially with form-based code, are contributing to the street frontage and can be adapted, we'll probably see that in the future. But I know that doesn't address the urgency of needing affordable housing now. That's where I'll hedge my bet at the bar for what's going to happen to the 30-unit apartment building that's all 1 bedrooms or studios, is it's going to change in the future.
I actually have a question for Andrew at Brattleboro. Berry City, about 1.5 years ago, we just overhauled our zoning and we adopted density standards, which is something we'd never had before, but significantly lowered the square footage requirement for a dwelling unit from 550 to a single bedroom is 220. But I'm finding that our 1.5 cars per dwelling unit isn't working for some people, and we found in my office that all of a sudden we're saying no more often than we ever did. And I'm wondering if you've run into that now that you eliminated your density cap. Did you lessen restrictions on parking or anything else? And everything goes hand in hand, and just trying to figure that one out. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have some experience in Washington State, and then when I came to Vermont, I'm like, wow, I was just thinking about the transportation system, and then I'm like, wow, you got to factor in that in Vermont we don't have the best sort of network of like transit and biking and pedestrian compared to my over in communities near Seattle, the Puget Sound area. And when we were doing this change, I was thinking, yeah, well, what happens when you have so many people driving because you don't have the services, the transit services, that would help mitigate against having less parking. So far, we haven't had much of an issue because a lot of the folks who are we've seen come into these units don't have vehicles. So in a lot of the locations are near, there's on-street parking options, and also that we have a parking garage downtown that can hold almost 300 cars, as well as some other public parking. So that's one we've seen that folks been taking advantage of that, and that we have, if a certain developments within a certain location or proximity to a public parking, we can eliminate parking minimums. That's kind of how we've been dealing with it right now. So I mean, it's yet to come, but I expect it's going to come up in the near future. But we'll have landlords asking to create more parking.
Thanks. We've got existing landlords with buildings in the downtown who've never had parking and either don't want to pay for the annual parking pass through the clerk's office, or they're parking on the front lawns. Everybody wants a car. I hope that we get to that point where we get more people living and working in my downtown, but I'm a commuter. I own 55 acres. I prefer to live in rural and drive, but my kids are exactly what we're talking about right now. They want to live in a more densely populated area and use public transit or walk or bike. And it's something that I'm recognizing here needs to be re-examined for sure. So thank you for that.
I'm curious regarding like on-street parking and bike lanes. I recently had a planning commissioner ask, is there a tension between zoning code and on-street parking when you're trying to think about creating bike lanes? That kind of popped in my head that, there could be a conflict there with the creation of bike lanes when you have on-street parking. Because I know a lot of here in Brattleboro, we have a lot of state highways that go through our town, and we're finding it difficulty to try to be creative when it comes to creating bike lanes, because you have parking right there already and we don't have the means to expand or create mediums, et cetera. So for me, it might just be a design issue, but I'm curious because I think that also directly just relates to housing and access and means of transportation other than car.
I think Burlington is definitely dealing with that. They've reduced their parking minimum requirements, but even before that, they had pretty low parking requirements. So a lot of the homes that are many units rely on street parking for their tenants. And then once people park on the street as a parking spot for their home, it's really difficult to take away that street parking and put things like bike infrastructure. So I think that's one of the things that really needs to be thought through when you're talking about parking minimums, is like who then uses the street as like their garage essentially, and what does that do to that public sphere, and like what becomes of the public opinion of how that public sphere is being used. So they've just done so much with bike accommodations lately, and it's been every street to battle to be able to focus on bikes and pedestrians over parked cars. So I would definitely think you should look really closely at that. I thought we're dealing with it in Winooski as well, because we're looking at, what to do with our parking, and there's a lot of push from the city to get rid of parking minimums. But what I think Burlington has going for them is if you get rid of parking Burlington's in downtown, parking minimums in downtown Burlington, they already have metered parking and they have parking lots, right? So like the system is set up where somebody who buys into a condo or starts renting an apartment doesn't have the assumption that that's free parking outside their unit. They already know that they're going to have to find an alternative place that's going to cost them money to park their car, versus like Winooski, where they really would be able to, and probably Brattleboro, they would be able to park for free in the street right outside their unit. So it's something, working in Burlington and living and working and being on the planning commission in Winooski, that I'm always really hesitant, because we've been giving developers some access to our on-street parking. And I'm like, you are not going to be able to get that back once you give it to them. So we have to think really carefully about getting bike infrastructure first. And then if there's the availability of on-street parking, going there.
Thank you.
I think there's a really interesting thread that Janet brings up about, and it feeds into some other topics. And maybe Matt also has some insights about parking, because they've just had an incredible amount of just residential growth in downtown Hartford, and I'm sure I've experienced some of the parking tensions. But the thing I'm thinking about is as you look at increasing density in your unit density in your community, and perhaps doing it through adaptive reuse to existing housing. Does that feed into when it results in cars parking on front lawns, or maybe some more haphazard modifications to a structure, that public pushback that Simone has spoke a little bit about, with naturally affordable housing or affordable housing, and how do you manage some of those tensions as you get rid of unit density, and maybe ease up on parking, but still have a parking problem to manage, right? So.
Hi, Jake, good point. This is Matt Osborne from the town of Hartford, and as Jake had mentioned, in downtown White River Junction, we've had a fair amount of development, both commercial and in residential. A couple of years ago, a new town manager came in, and he felt like he had heard a lot about the barrier to housing being impact fees. So the town eliminated those impact fees, and we have seen an increase in housing in our downtown. As Jake mentioned, we have a little bit of a parking challenge. Historically, we haven't had a parking problem in the downtown, and we've been monitoring parking for the last 15 years. And our planning commission is really struggling with, enforcing parking requirements, and yet allow some flexibility related to, alternative transportation, bike commuting, carpooling, transit. And so we're trying to make sure we don't create a parking problem downtown, while encouraging housing, which our downtown desperately needed. So we're getting that housing, but we're also trying to balance the need for parking and to create a more bikeable and pedestrian friendly downtown.
Some of you folks seeing multiple housing being built on an annual basis? Like, I know we have to fill out that census form that says, your municipality has built X number of single family homes. I mean, we maybe get 2 a year, if that, in the city that I work in. So one of the things that we got creative, the planning commission did, was while instituting a density cap, we lowered our square footage, and we now have two smaller footprint homes on a single lot. The moniker tiny house, we just try to call them smaller footprint, and that's really worked out well. They were built at Norwich University, so I just think that was a win-win for us and for the people that built them.
Do you know the square footage and what the pricing was?
Each of the homes, they were built at 420 square feet each. Our zoning requires that they be built on a foundation. So you can't come in with your tiny home on wheels, otherwise that's a camper and you have to follow other rules. But each one was 420, and that is actually managed by a housing authority here in the city for it's not recovery residents, but it's used as transitional housing at the moment. So teaches someone how to be responsible. They've got their own home. I think they're cute.
Janet, do you happen to know what they're going for, what the rental is?
I don't. I'd have to ask the housing authority what they do, and if they do it. I don't know what their specific program is there, but I could certainly put you in touch. It's Down Street Housing. You could actually speak with them.
One of our homeless providers down here just formed a partnership with a manufacturer called Pallet Shelters. They're out of Washington State. So I don't know if Andrew, but these are not on foundations, and these are purely in place of a shelter. So there is actually no rent, but it does, especially with COVID, it gets people off of the street and it gives them an individual dwelling space, and they manage it as a community. So a service, a social worker, has contact, et cetera. So,
so we are getting close to the end of our discussion. So I wanted to give folks that heads up in case anyone had a pressing question they wanted to elevate. And then, so I'll first do that. If anyone has a sort of final comment or thought or question for the group. And hearing no takers, I wanted to, part of our process will be to report back just sort of the three facilitators. We're all gonna just, for the larger group, when we all go back to the main room, just sort of run through some of the main points of what each breakout room talked about. And I was, obviously only here for a bit of it, but I wondered if anyone had important points or common themes or lessons learned that they personally are going to take back that they think was a central part of the discussion in this room today.
I'm going to assure the people in Rhode Island that we have the same problems as the people in Vermont.
I love that. I like the universality of that personally.
I found it important to be reminded that the mismatch we're facing is in a couple dimensions. One is a housing size to dwelling mismatch, and the other is a geographic mismatch. Whereas there might be more demand for the smaller units in the more compact areas, that doesn't mean there's no demand for family size units. And though there might be demand for smaller units in rural areas, that's the challenge there, whereas there are more family size units. So that's a good reminder about how to be sensitive when working with different towns or working on different policies, including infrastructure policies.
I think one of the important points was made by Diane, the idea that housing is a fixed asset and it's influenced by a market that is in the here and now, but you can't know with every 10 years where technology is going to take us, where I'll say fashion, but I mean where, transit technology might take us, where people's preferences take us. And so what, people who are new families in the 1950s wanted versus what are people who are new families in 2021 want are different things. So it's a very shaky ground. And then to layer what affordability is, especially in the midst of a pandemic, is it's difficult.
That's a great point.
I think a major takeaway for me is just hearing Brattleboro's story of adopting interim zoning and lifting the density caps and producing, did you say 20 units in less than a year? That's how much demand there is in an infill situation where there's already existing utilities and infrastructure and access to jobs and services. So that's a tremendous success story, I think.
Andrew, do you think that when we get back to the group, if I could call on you to just give like the 1-minute summary of that to the larger group, would you mind doing that?
Sure, no problem.
Great, that would be wonderful. I'd just like everyone to get to hear it.
Or I guess the takeaway for me is, act fast when necessary. You know, find the support, use that support to your advantage to adopting code if it is